want to move forward. So those who have questions or responses to the film, I think the protocol is that you have to come to this mic. Is that right? Right. You come to this mic and ask your question, and Jeremiah can see you from that camera there. It's a little bit of a complicated setup, but I think we're all good. Can we start? Is he online?
I'm here. Hello?
There. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
I'm good, Jeremiah. I don't think you can see the audience. Sandhya, can he see the audience? Okay, well,
I can see you.
You can see me, right?
Yeah, that's it. But I think if people come to the podium, I can see them.
Yes, you can. But then there's a fantastic audience here. There were more than 100 people to watch the film. Yes. And,
Thanks
I think
for coming.
about them have stayed back to listen to you.
Nice.
Yes. So thank you very much for sharing the film. Should I be looking there or here? Okay, it's very strange.
Either way.
All right. So, yes. So here's Jeremiah Hayes. He's a Canadian director, award-winning director, editor, writer. And his filmmaking has been awarded with a Peabody Award, which is, if I understand right, is the equivalent of the Pulitzer Prize, right?
Probably the Pulitzer Prize is a little bit more prestigious, but yeah, it's
I was Googling what exactly is this Peabody Award, and that's what it said.
Yeah.
So yes,
Okay.
he's also notable as a co-director, as a co-writer and editor of how do you pronounce it?
Real Engine?
The film that you have made, Engine, Real Engine.
Real Engine. Yeah.
So that's a documentary which looks at how Hollywood represents Native American Indians.
Right.
Yes, yeah. And after which he's made another documentary, the more recent one called Rumble, which again looks at how Native American music has influenced current rock music scene. Yeah,
Right.
and that has, yeah. So that has been nominated for the Emmy. And so here we have somebody who's very deeply invested in the idea of representation, from what I understand of by his films that he has been working with. And with Dear Audrey, what he does is it's a complete departure from the representation of the other to something very, very personal, to the story of a political activist filmmaker in his most vulnerable place, which is amidst his family, at his home. Do you want to kind of introduce the film, or can I just kind of try to contextualize the film?
Sure.
In terms of, so your first job as a fresh graduate from film school was as editor to Martin Duckworth, right?
That's right. Actually, I was his assistant editor. And so that was my first job out of film school. I got a job, luckily, at the National Film Board of Canada, which is like a government-run documentary animation house. And he was making a film called Peacekeeper at War, which was a film criticizing the role of Canadian armed forces in the Gulf War. That was the war against between Iraq and when Iraq invaded Kuwait. And so so he and I kept in touch ever since. So that was 30 years ago. And so about 5-6 years ago, I heard that his wife Audrey was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I approached him to ask him if I could make a film about his life, but also Audrey's life and him on a daily basis caring for her. Because I saw how lovingly he was caring for her, and I wanted to show that. And I knew how how what beautiful people they were. So I thought I should put them on film.
So was it that when you began working with him in the 90s, right? And he
Yeah,
was known as a political filmmaker,
right.
and so there was a particular kind of a filmmaker that you had encountered, you had met, and there's a line in your director's note where you say that in the manner in which he spoke truth in his films was what inspired you, right? So
Yeah.
maybe 30 years down the line, there is another human being that you're seeing. So, because somebody who is very invested in the political kind of filmmaking, here you see him in a complete departure in something that is very, very personal. So, were you trying to kind of understand him in this new role through the film? I mean, what was, I mean, so did you kind of pick up the camera right from the word go? Did you know there was a film right from the word go, or
Oh
was it
yeah.
something?
I didn't know all the stories that came out in the film at first, but I knew he had a fascinating life story. And so I wanted to blend that with his daily caring for Audrey, because I know whether it's through his filmmaking or through his daily life, he doesn't compromise. He is very true to his politics in both ways. So he's a pacifist, socialist in his politics, but he also is he's a pacifist in his daily life in the way he treats people on the street or his neighbors. He's very caring and kind. And I think he learned that through Audrey. I think Audrey also came from a very political background and family. And so she taught Martin, according to Martin, that's what he told me. He taught, excuse me, she taught him that you can't just be political at parties or with friends. You have to live it on a daily basis and be live true to your values. And that inspired me a lot. I saw him and the way he acts and with people on a daily basis. And um, yeah, I found that very inspiring. And also, when you're making a film, one of the most important things is character development. And your characters you have to show them as sympathetic, lovable characters, but you have to show them warts and all. You have to show every aspect. You can't just show the good. But yeah, so I thought that for me, I knew there was a good film in there, just knowing Martin and his character and Audrey as well. And then later Jacqueline became a big element of the film. Yeah. So that dynamic, I thought there was an energy too between the three of them that played well.
Absolutely. I mean, Jacqueline, in fact, grows so beautifully as a character through the film, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she's wonderful and she's got a great sense of humor, and she kind of lends a different eye to what's going on, a different perspective. And she speaks she's just plain way of speaking and just lets you know what's going on. So I thought that was important.
So how difficult is it? I mean, this trying to bring the political into the personal, is that a challenge, especially if you know the person very well, or how did you build that? How did you work on that?
Well, I just thought it was a plus. I thought it was the he and I share very similar politics and ways of being. But he's much more of a purist than I am. He's a more purist of a pacifist, and I found that inspiring. To so I if anything, it gave me energy through the filmmaking process, and especially when I got down to editing. Because when you're if just because I did the camera, when you're filming, you're not exactly sure what you're getting, but you feel. But when you start editing it, you really realize, oh wow, that kind of works. And so was spurred on by that energy that he has, and Audrey and especially between him, Audrey, and Jacqueline. There's this loving, caring energy that resounds through just through the nature of the footage, right? So,
Yes, I mean, for me, what was very, very moving was so she's walking, and then he's like very quietly walking beside her, and then she's almost at the precipice, and
yeah,
he quietly moves in. Then you have that on. mean, that is a very powerful
Yeah.
scene
Yeah.
with.
That whole, because I knew he did that. Well, you know, it's common for people with Alzheimer's to wander and get lost, and that can be dangerous. So I knew he did that. Like he would leave the front door open he lives not far from my house, and she would wander out, and rather than stop her and get back in the house, he would just follow her, curious to see where she was going. And I think that was important process in her illness, in the sense that it would let her mind wander, because that's where her illness is kind of taking her. And so rather than restrict her, he just sort of was in his own personal way curious to know where she was going. And I think that led to possibly her not being as frustrated or angry through the illness, because it is common for people with Alzheimer's to get frustrated and angry, which is understandable given that your body is in some way shutting down and not letting you do the things you used to be able to do. So I think that caring and kind way of being with her helped her a lot, of course, but also he was in kind, very caring and loving to him. You know, you saw on film, she is often affectionate, and I think that helped him as a caregiver to not give up and be inspired, and he has always positive reinforcement, knowing that she was understanding of his care and reciprocating. So, yeah.
Maybe we throw this to the audience if there are questions,
Mhm.
and then we turn later. Yeah, any questions there? Any responses to the film? Swati, come.
Hello, can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you for making this wonderful film and for sharing it with us here. Um, uh, Two things, one of which you already sort of mentioned. What I found remarkable throughout the was the complete absence of rancor of any kind, of any negative feeling of frustration, anger, which is which comes with something like Alzheimer's within the person and also within the caregiver. And it's remarkable how completely absent it was in the film, and that was remarkable, which you also mentioned. The second thing is your camera. It is very, very gentle. It's there. It's there, right there inside their home, in very intimate sort of places. But at no point does it feel even remotely intrusive. It just continues to stay in that sort of intimacy and gentleness at all times, and I found that very remarkable again and very moving.
Thanks.
And how would you, is that, I mean, was it sort of, can you share a little about that? Was it sort of
Sure.
responding at all times to what you were seeing, or were there some difficult decisions that you had to make? How did you, could you share that, something about that?
Well, in terms of the camera, I really wanted my presence as the cameraman filmmaker to be as inobtrusive as possible. So I wanted to be as close to shooting a home movie or shooting something on your iPhone as possible. So I bought a camera. It's called the A7S, and which is very good in low light. It's a very small camera from Sony. And the idea was really to have a very small footprint and to go to Martin's house. I went to his house once or twice a month for 4 years, and to really blend in and first of all be a friend in the house. So if something was going on, I was there to help out and not to be I'm there to film. And it turns out every time I went, it felt like something interesting was happening and something magical was happening in the home, and I would film it. And so it was really about just not having a lot of equipment and being a friend in the room. And I learned that through experience also while working on other documentaries. For example, Rumble, when we would go shoot, it was like a whole team of people, trucks full of equipment. And I thought after that experience, I thought, I don't want to do that again because it is very intrusive. It's cumbersome, it's slow. And I thought I wanted to just capture the moment and have the freedom to do that. And small package of equipment really help. It just makes it so that if anything's happening, you can get up and go at a spur of a moment. And yeah, I part of it too was to arrange the filmmaking process so I could do everything myself. So I didn't have to, hey, call a sound guy or a camera guy and let's organize a shoot. It would just happen like you're shooting a relative for a home movie. And so, yeah, it was all about also being very responsive to their needs and whatever was going on in real life, and caring for them whatever they needed. So yeah, and you mentioned their anger. I think that's just who they are. They've I think if you've led a kind of life where you're true to your values, or like you meditate, or you kind of work on yourself, then when something horrible comes along, like a fatal illness, you're more ready for it. And I know that happened with me, and my mother had a Lou Gehrig's disease, so it's a similar process, and she faced it with a lot of courage and grace. And I think that's what Audrey was able to do, is just face her illness with grace and to not panic. Like, I don't think she ever panicked or got very upset, as far as I could see. Yeah.
So as an extension of what you were saying, so were there moments while you were in the house filming where there were certain moments which were so difficult that you couldn't bring yourself to film, or did you kind of, you have filmed and there are certain moments that you haven't brought into the final film?
No, there were never any moments where I felt like I couldn't film or anything was happening. Most of the good scenes that I filmed are in the film, and there was nothing that I felt like, oh, I should turn the camera off now. I don't know why. I maybe there was the closest thing was when they were getting dressed, and I thought, well, if they're getting undressing, that I should turn off the camera at a certain moment. But I decided to keep filming, and maybe there's a moment where I blurred some parts out. But I never really thought, I never felt that way, that there was times when I had to turn the camera off. And I think that goes to the fact that Martin was very open to everything I was doing. So if I ever suggested, can I shoot this or shoot that, he would never say no. And I think that goes to him being a filmmaker, and he knows what I have in mind, and maybe he trusts me. So yeah, it really worked out well that way.
Yeah, you can come to the mic.
Hi,
Hi.
I have a follow-up question to what you just shared. There was a moment on the street when Audrey is lost, and Jacqueline and Martin are looking for her. And I mean, since it's a scene in the film, I'm imagining that you had the camera on. So, what is that decision making like? And most of the scene you had focused on Jacqueline, and not on Martin. So I was also curious of what is happening outside of the camera as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I had brought the camera to film them walking to buy a bird. And I thought that would be the scene. And then I turned the camera off and we were ready to go home. And then the Audrey disappeared. So I, at that moment, decided to turn the camera back on. And I think you literally see the camera being turned on almost. And I'm trying to find my focus. So yeah, I think that that just goes to me. Just, I think when you're filming, you just have to show up. And that was the kind of documentary I wanted to make, is just spend the time to be there with them and capture their reality. And yeah, and I think also there's scenes like that with Jacqueline, and there's another scene with their son Nick where he receives a photo album. It shows how when your parent or a loved one is very ill, everything that happens is more raw and more emotional. So I think that you see Jacqueline and Nick's reaction, and they get quite upset. And I think that that is common in terms of, yeah, you're just living that with that knowledge that your parent or loved one is has a fatal illness, and everything is more immediate and more intense. And that's what I think came through in those scenes.
Yeah. Thank you for a very moving film, and I particularly liked the way Audrey connects with the camera every time she passes, connects with you. Those are
Yeah.
very special moments. Yeah. So I was wondering how you arrived at the form of the film. Did you decide in the beginning itself whether you would use his voice as a way to kind of, unravel the story? And was there any time you felt that Audrey Audrey's voice wasn't there? Did you kind of miss that in some way? Did you
Yeah.
think that?
Oh, I definitely was worried about that early on. And unfortunately, I did, there were times where I tried to interview her, but I think even though her mind was still aware of what's going on and very clued in, she wasn't able to string sentences together, unfortunately, by the time I was filming. So I knew that I was worried about that, and I wanted to give her a voice. But I think I hopefully that just through her gestures and the way she cared for Martin, and through showing her as a younger woman, that we would be able to tell her story and give her the respect and the dedication through the film that she deserved. And in terms of Martin's voice, I thought early on that it would be good to make him the narrator, almost like a monologue, and have one voice telling the entire story throughout the whole film. And I thought that would be a good device to hold the film together. It was kind of the glue of the film. And luckily he's a good storyteller. He's very articulate, and he knows how to craft a good story. Yeah, but yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah, I wish that I could have gotten more from Audrey. I actually scoured all the archives of every family member and friend to find any video of Audrey, and there wasn't any, or there was very, very little. To sort of, I was hoping to sprinkle that throughout the film, but I think maybe she was camera shy or something. I don't know. There's very little video of her.
So, did you have a relationship with Audrey from before? Did you know her well?
I knew Audrey from 91 is when I met Martin and Audrey, and we don't live far from each other, so we were in touch over the past 30 years. And yeah, so we are friends. But, you know, Martin and I and Audrey became much closer once I started filming. You know, it was over there, and I still go over there. I'm going there this afternoon. So, yeah.
Hello, thank you for the
Hi.
question. My question is about this use of music, because you use music extensively, and I think it's composed for the film. And
Yeah.
also, you had shots of them shooting footage, which is rather sometimes violent. So, I'm just opposing that with their story and the use of music and animation in the film, which makes it a little bit more constructed in the sense that you are putting in a lot of. How did you make that decision, and did you have a reference for the music when you were imagining it?
Well, certainly there was a lot of, I was trying to deal with music archives and the historical moments and the animation to sort of play off each other and to contrast with the daily life of Martin and Audrey in their home. So music definitely was a way to make things less dark and depressing, to make it more light and playful. So I really wanted music to play a strong role in that way, to bring playfulness and to some charm and to be somewhat stylistic in its approach. And so I knew also that at one point I was thinking I'll make a film of just Martin and Audrey in their house, but I thought that maybe that would become a little too claustrophobic, and one note, it would be like you're making music, it would be one note all the time. So I thought that the use of archives would break us out of that world. It was they're in their home, it's very intimate and loving, but it's also kind of, they're dimly lit and one location. But when you break that up with archives and the history, it shakes the audience out of that world. And I always wanted it to be in your face and somewhat violent, because I thought it would contrast with their daily life, but also be an unromantic picture of their past. So I didn't want to romanticize the Vietnam War or the 60s. And the social revolution of the 60s. I wanted it to be harsh and realistic, and also not to be something unique, you know, because I think oftentimes the 60s are romanticized in documentaries and in culture here. So yeah, so it was about contrasting energies between their home, the archives, which are much more brutal and in your face. But then the other contrasting element was the animation. So the animation was meant to be much more dreamlike and creative and playful again, and to be like their lives, where they were both, Martin and Audrey were both artists. So to bring in the more creative element throughout the film. And the idea was to always keep the audience guessing what was coming next, but also always throwing the audience in a different realm. So if you analyze the film, is that each time there's a scene with Martin in their home, it's always followed by something dramatically different. So it's never followed by another scene of them in their home. So that was the idea too, is to get into that rhythm of constantly throwing a different world into the following scene that you'd be experiencing.
Any more questions before I go in for my last question?
Yeah, sure.
Last response, actually. Yeah, come.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a question and a comment, but I'll start with the question first. I found that scene where Audrey disappears when they're walking together and then she's just no longer there. And I was wondering what you felt as a filmmaker when that was going on. I mean, was it hard to keep filming and, sticking to your job, or being a close family friend and just panicking and running around to look after, see if you can find her? So that came into my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, that in that scene, and there's the other scene where she's walking along in a park and Martin is following her. There were times where I felt like, okay, maybe I should put the camera down. But I always was sort of looking both ways to see, okay, is it safe to keep filming? Or is it because the priority is their safety. I think that if it would have helped, I would have put the camera down, because I knew that both Jacqueline and Martin were looking for her, and I got the sense that Martin wasn't as worried as Jacqueline was, because he's more used to it. So yeah, I remember at the time she would disappear and he said, "Oh, don't worry, she'll find her way back home," which I think did happen, but there were times where they had to call the police because they didn't know where she was. So yeah, it was on my mind when in that scene and others where, where do I put the camera down? And I definitely would have if I thought it was really crucial and would have helped. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say was, like everyone else here, a big thank you, because we've been dealing with this at home in a big way. And I think seeing the film, the closeness of the couple comes through so beautifully that I think it's moving my thoughts away from, all good things that have to be done for the patient, and you've got to do all this to make sure that the disease doesn't progress. I think the film's gentleness and really talking about the love between the two people, and taking risks, and especially the very intimate scenes, I think that's really left me very, very much calmer. And I must thank you for that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, it's a testament to Martin and Audrey's character. And I think that is, it's kind of corny, but it is the best. Love is the best medicine in a lot of cases. Yeah. And I think that that's what we do, a lot of screenings also for organizations that are related to Alzheimer's and dementia. So that is a common discussion we have amongst the Alzheimer's professionals, is how do you care for each other in that situation? And it takes a lot of patience, and people don't have it. It's hard to deal with on a daily basis. And so it just goes to show just the tenderness and love that Audrey had for Martin, and vice versa, can really help.
In fact, on your website, dearaudrey.ca, you will find there is one tab for Alzheimer's support.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, you can that's there are links in there to I only have Canadian and American foundations, but there are links where you can either donate or volunteer or become part of a research study and in that way to help out.
Yeah. Are there any more questions? Any more responses? We have to wind up. Okay.
Okay.
Is there time for just one last question? No?
Sure.
She can? Sarvana? No, time up. Okay, I'm very sorry. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeremiah.
Thank you.
It was fantastic. Sorry to wake you up very early on a weekend morning.
No, it's not too bad.
I hope it was worth your time.
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, I really appreciate you showing the film and inviting me. It was a real pleasure. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much once
Thank
again.
you. Take care.